Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at our Litera Spotlight on webinar series. Today, we'll be talking about anonymizing content with one of our latest applications, Clause Companion. We have two presenters today, myself, Matt Miller. I'm Director of Product Management here at Litera and generally helping oversee our products. With me is my colleague, Theo Lister, and I'll let him introduce himself quickly.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. So I manage product strategy. So as a high-level overview, I've been doing some of the research into some of the trends affecting the topic we're here to talk about today. And then Matt's the one who's taking that and building it into actionable content that then people can consume.
Perfect. Moving on, just a couple housekeeping items. Everybody who's joined the webinar today are automatically placed on mute. If you do have questions, there is a chat box within the GoTo webinar system. You'll find it there on the right-hand side of the screen, most likely. You can type your questions in there. So that covers the chat portion as well. We will have a section at the end after today's demonstration piece where you can, where we'll go over your questions and answer them. If for some reason we run out of time, we'll just follow up with you directly after today's webinar. The agenda for today is we're going to look at the evolution of the market needs specific to our new Anonymize feature. So where have we come from and how did we get to the automation of reusable content? So Thea will kind of walk us through that, as well as we'll look at some other publications that have helped us focus in on why this particular feature set is important in the marketplace. We'll look at what technology trends are as part of that within law firms today, and then we'll do a demonstration of our new Anonymize feature that's part of Clause Companion. With that, I'll kind of kick things over to Theo to walk us through the evolution of the market needs.
Absolutely. And the market needs, particularly in the terms of drafting of documentation, have really been shifting. I mean, law as a practice is one of the three original professions, what with being a doctor and being in the clergy, and we work in life sciences and legal, so hopefully we get two out of those three and we know them relatively well. But really the process of drafting has been manual for so many years and really has only started changing at a great pace over the past 40 to 50. And manual processes are still very heavily baked into the profession. As a result of that, law has a long history, it has a lot of tradition built in, and some of that is the act of sitting down and drafting something manually. And one of those parts of that is the copying and pasting. So we see a lot of the time that lawyers, when they're trying to find novel standards and new things to present for their clients, they will be looking back at what they've done before, what their colleagues have done before, and one, trying to find it, and then secondly, drawing that back into whatever they're working on. You'll see a lot of lawyers have a really great deal recall. You can ask them a question about something they drafted 20 years ago, and they'll immediately know what you're talking about. But then they'll have to also go and find it if they want to pull that specific language into what they're working on currently. So we work with a lot of firms who have some internal estimates as to how long that takes. One recently estimated it takes about 50 hours per transaction for their firm just to find all that stuff and then bring it back. So there's definitely a need for document assembly. And of course, that is something that's been developing for quite a while as well. Document assembly, so the process of having some sort of automation built into the initial kickoff of what you're drafting for your clients, has gone through a few major phases. And there are also quite a few problems that have been lurking in this area that's existed. There's partial solutions for, and some things that we're working on towards as well. So firms do still struggle to an extent with managing forms for practice groups. We've been talking about this for years or maybe even decades, but they can still get to this issue with assigning responsibility for the maintenance of standard forms and making sure that best practices are adhered to and then updated as new regimes for regulation change or new firm standards. Mainly, it's an issue about getting attorneys to review forms and time to time doing that every year, making sure there's a system that gets set up that doesn't become out of date due to lack of action. And documentation is a huge part of the practice of law, but firms can also struggle with templates and forms because the initial reaction, particularly when you're trying to sell something like this to the lawyers who will be the ones drafting and using, is there even any point to bothering to do this? There's, of course, hours of time that get spent just correcting some of the issues that happen when you copy and paste content from one document to another, when you pick a document out of your DMS and start using it again for a new client. That wastes hours, but admittedly, that's something that the lawyers aren't always correcting. And the question is, should I waste 30 minutes trying to learn how to use this new system? Of course, we have our opinions on that, but that is the continual struggle that KM teams are running against. So there's about 5 core reasons that templating or document assembly initiatives have had issues in the past. And one of them is the economies of scale, because you see firms typically have a limited number of templates being used repeatedly. But that's more the case for the companies or the clients that the law firms are serving, rather than the firms themselves, who have to be multidisciplinary. And the drafting process, when you're called by a client and they say, I have this particular issue, I have a transaction I'm trying to close, and this is what I need from you, that can be unpredictable and they can change massively. And finding a template to solve all the world's ills can be very difficult, and particularly difficult to plan for in advance. So the scaling can be problematic, and that's why you see lawyers reverting back to that old process, dupe and revise, finding what they've done before and sticking with it. The billable hour, I've talked about a lot. It probably isn't worth going into too much here, but it's a disincentive for multiple reasons. One, if you're still able to bill by the hour, then document assembly elevates the speed at which a lawyer can draft. So you're maybe billing less. That is less of a concern mostly across the board, unless you're a very prestigious, very boutique firm. It's likely that firms are pushing back more and more on how much can be brought into as part of the billing hour. But there's also the billing hour is seen internally as part of the measure of how good the lawyers are in a firm. The more hours you put in that you can bill, the better you are, the closer you are to partner track. And the expertise that's required, particularly internally, in creating templates that have the best substance with the best language, that's very different to taking precedent contracts and tweaking them and moving the words around. So doing deals doesn't necessarily mean that the lawyers themselves have the knowledge to create templates, and that's why there is so much specialization involved in that role. And then you get down to the department level, you move up from the individual lawyer, away from the support staff, the knowledge management teams, and then you see that within departments and law firms, each partner might have different opinions on what needs to be used, how things should be drafted, and you see quite a lot that a new trainee or a new junior might come in with the best of intents to use templating systems, and then the partners will turn around and say, no, this is how we do it here. These are the 10 documents that I use for most of my transactions, and you should use these. And if you send me something else and I need to approve it, then we're going to have an awkward conversation. So it's very much a cultural aspect to that, and the fact that partners effectively have the last say in what's done inside their departments. So you see, as we move across these market needs, that's a lot of coverage on document assembly, and document assembly, despite all of those stumbling blocks, has progressed and it has matured as a concept, and there's a lot of new market impetus into where that can be taken in the future. So rather than having document assembly be superseded by automate and reuse, which is the next concept in these market needs, we see more of a facilitation, 2 separate tracks to cover 2 separate needs. And then in terms of something like dynamic anonymization, which is where you take the existing workflow, which is dupe and revise, maybe pick up a DMS document, work with that, and then systems that work into that concept to take information and make sure that it's sanitized for future use. And of course, next, Matt will show a little bit about what we're doing to approach that problem. So I've talked a lot about the past. That's all well and good, but now I want to talk about today and what's going on in firms currently. So we have all these issues. They're not all resolved, but we have seen that in surveys of law firms, and this is from the 2018 Adherent Business of Law and Legal Technology survey, the top 2 responses are that how can we drive efficiency? It's by automating routine tasks, and it's by automating workflows. So we see, in terms of the structure of law firms, there's always that impetus of newer and younger lawyers, and in particular, millennials are taking a chunk out of what is perceived as how law firms should be run, and they're driving a lot of change. and particularly because younger junior associates who see a firm that doesn't have these systems in place, that doesn't have technology to help them with reusing content, they're actually going out and using technology themselves, sometimes out of process with the IT team, but they see that as a competitive advantage in trying to prove themselves as somebody who can be relied upon to draft excellent advice for their clients. We see that because Clause Companion, which is one of our fastest growing products, is a direct response to the fact that we were seeing such a high level of individual focus on the management of work product from lawyers. People were effectively doing their own thing before we came in there. They were storing their own clauses, maybe in a Word document, maybe in the recycle bin on the desktop, maybe within Outlook as a draft email, and they were using that. And it kind of takes that evolution of the market need and goes all the way from the end where we thought we were and going straight back to copy and paste, which was only a little bit after we got rid of the quill and parchment era and moved into automated typing machines. So it's been a strange ebb and flow in terms of what we've been doing, but there's the reality that technology is needed, that there's more adoption and acceptance of it is routinely being accepted. And that's why we made Clause Companion, because there was this habitual shunning of complex templating, but when it comes to that reuse workflow, that's something that people are using and they're doing today. So there's an acceptance that as long as it works within that workflow, rather than trying to force an alternative layer of regulation upon the lawyers, then that would get acceptance and people would start to use it. So we facilitated that and then made sure that as we move on, you support the fact that this dupe and revise process is still an issue, and then go into some of the particular components of a duped and revised document and sort those out for the users. So that's a long step from the history as to what we're doing today. And now Matt has in his hands what we're actually doing to solve that issue.
Yep. All right. Well, so thank you, Theo, for that trip down memory lane there and kind of an overview of kind of where we've been and kind of where things are going. And just to kind of, as we take the next step into looking at the demonstration of the product here, we know, as Theo pointed out, people are still copying and pasting. We have younger lawyers who want to do some of this work, but we need the process of document automation to be simple. This is a feature that we've implemented into the product that is heavily driven from our customer base. So we'll step through it in a live demonstration here, but I've got it in the deck as well. But basically, it's a three-step process. Our Clause Companion Anonymize feature, the functionality is integrated within Microsoft Word and will be a series of buttons on a ribbon within your environment. Clicking the Save Clause or Save Document button will bring up a dialog, which now allows you, has a little checkbox in the bottom left. You can see it with the red rectangle around it, which says to anonymize. If that box is checked, when you click OK to save content off for reuse in the future, if the system detects one of our flags, we will automatically bring it to the user's attention so that they can anonymize the content to more quickly reuse that content in the future. And that's this last dialog here. So with that kind of quick introduction, I'll step us through an actual demonstration of that particular product now. So as I mentioned, it is a Microsoft Word add-in. If you've got other Litera products, it can sit and will sit by default amongst those other products on the ribbon. At this point, all I've done is click Show Library to open the Clause Companion task pane on the right, and I'm just looking to see what other content has been made available to me and potentially what other areas of my law firm I can share with. Here I've got my clauses section, and that's where the new Anonymize capability kind of integrates with at the user level. So I've got this master services agreement. Let's say I'm constantly reusing this document, but what I'm always having to do when I reuse this document is go through it and replace the names, the dates, emails, all the negotiable information, and that is time consuming. So what Anonymize does is helps me automatically find those things, remove them, and automate this document for quicker reuse in the future. So because I want to use the whole document, I'm going to choose Save Document. And as I mentioned, the first step here will be to get a prompt from the application, and we'll name this particular piece of content. I'm going to call it MSA. We do automatically put some metadata down, but it is a free form field, so you can remove this content if you wanted to, but it says my name, the created on date, and the document name that's specified at the top there. And then I can pick the location where I want to save the content. I only have one folder, so I'm going to save it into my favorite content location. This then is the new feature here, the Anonymize clause. So you can choose to just save off the content without running Anonymize by unchecking it, or, which we're going to demonstrate now, is to run the saving of content with anonymizing it as well. So I'll choose OK. You can see our processing dialog, analyzing the document for items within the piece of content that you may not want to reuse as you go to reuse this document in the future. So what you see here at the top is a very similar look and feel to our contract companion application if you have our proofreading suite. But what you can do here is search for different terms within the list of things we found. If there's something in here particular that you want to look for, you can look over here on the right for the filter categories. Everything is categorized as a date, a company, a location, an address, a title, and so on. If all you cared about anonymizing was email addresses as an example, you could just filter on emails and handle that. In this example, I'm going to do everything, so that's 33 items within this, 33 unique items within this document that will be anonymized. And from an anonymization standpoint, you have three options. You can use a blank line, so that will just put a standard word blank line within the document, and you'll know that this is a placeholder where new text needs to go. Similarly, you could put a symbol, which will just insert a dot in the document as a placeholder to say content is needed here. Or you can automate the reuse of this document with variable capabilities. So I'm going to choose variable, which is the default, and I'll choose OK. And what it's doing right now is it's anonymizing the content and marking that with variables for quicker reuse in the future. So you can see that document has been saved under my favorite content, and if I want to use it now, I can just double click to bring it up. And this time when I'm accessing my document, obviously I have quicker access to it here directly within Microsoft Word, but you'll see all of those areas of the document that I wouldn't want my next customer to see. The email addresses, the dates, the negotiables have all been anonymized with these underlines. Currently, they are automated fields, which I can singularly fill in from this task pane on the right. So if I needed to fill in today's date, 1/14/2020, and I can tab down to say Latera. And you can see as I'm filling in this information, it's automatically populating that content in the document. When I'm done, I can hit finish. But very quickly, I'm able to create a document for faster reuse in the future. So not only can I access the content more quickly from within the Clause Companion system, I can reuse the content more quickly with the new Anonymize feature. And you can see how simple it is, so that we really are focusing on those end users who want to reuse content in a more automated way much more quickly. So with that, I'm going to pop back over to the PowerPoint and kick it back over to Theo to talk about next steps and go over any questions that might have come in during the session today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been keeping an eye on the things people have been asking as we go through. Apologies if we don't get to everything, but we will follow up with everybody if we don't get to all the questions as we go through this. And in terms of next steps, before we get to that Q&A, you will be able to see future webinars on Latera.com on our webinars page. So if you like this, or you thought there's something that was coming in the future would be good for you or somebody you work with to see, please take a look at that and sign up. But with that, I'll just ask a few questions that have come in. The first being about Clause Companion. So which version of it is needed in order to see the feature, Matt, that you've just shown?
Sure. So Anonymize came out with our Q4 release. That's version 4.4. It is the most current version on the Customer Center to date. Just a note for those customers that own Contract Companion and Clause Companion, there is integration that's occurring between the two systems. So if you have them duly installed, you'll want to have the latest version or the second to latest version of Contract Companion on your machines as well.
Yeah, that's right. And that's, for everyone's reference, that's Contract Companion 10.4 or 10.5. But for those of you that don't already have Contract Companion, that is not a prerequisite to getting Clause Companion in this feature. That's just more of a if you're running two in the same environment.
Yep, good point.
Another question was about the anonymization process, and that's a lot of that's automated, but can people specify what's found instead?
So it's a great question. We get it quite a bit. So today the answer is no. We are it's a set of rules we're looking for based on understanding legal documents. So you could see the email addresses, names, dates, those types of things, and that's all baked into the anonymization process. As part of the Q1 release for Clause Companion, we're looking to allow the user to specify additional items that they might want anonymized. So you'll be able to curate your own list of things you might want to find and replace as part of our Q1 release. And that's, again, driven pretty heavily based on feedback since the new feature's been in the market.
All right, thanks for that. And for this one, I don't have any more context than this. Matt, maybe you'll know more, but the question is just, can I save lists of favorites?
Yes, so today, no, but as we move towards the find and replace, if we get the find and replace capabilities into the system where you could save off your own list of finding favorites or curate your own list of finding favorites, you'd be able to store those off within the system for faster reuse in the future. And what I mean by that is if you're always doing find and replace in Word today for the same types of things, you will no longer have to open up Word and do find and replace every time. You could save that list off within the system so that we're always looking at a particular document type or all documents for those pieces that you wouldn't want in something you're reusing.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I think that's everything I have on my list. Again, if I've skipped over anything, we'll follow up by email afterwards. But other than that, I think what Matt mentioned about the latest version being on the Customer Center, again, Latera.com, there's an option to access the Customer Center. And if you have access to Clause Companion, you'll be able to see it there. If not, on the site, there'll also be a space to talk to one another to work out how you can get access or how you can try it out. And other than that, I don't think we had anything else to be met. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any particular questions about anything covered here.
Yep, thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, everybody. Bye for now.